Happy Tuesday morning, everyone. We are so excited. We have Travis Thompson with us this morning. He's coming to us from Murfreesboro outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And Travis, welcome. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And Travis has a new book out, which we're going to talk about. He is a licensed therapist with marriages, with families, with a really emphasis on addiction, and not only addiction, but perhaps severe addictions and mental issues. So we're going to talk about that today, certainly in the span of what's happening in our world, because we know loneliness, depression, addiction. I mean, it's so easy to get any kind of drug that you want, and it's so easy to numb whatever life pain you're feeling. So we're going to talk about that with Travis this morning. So Travis, I'm so excited.
Well, thank you. I'm excited as well.
So you're with the pulse of what's happening in the world, because you have clients, you have patients, you have people coming in with a need to be understood, heard, helped. So what are you seeing mostly today that is what is happening just kind of in the world?
So I think it depends on exactly where it is, but especially in the US, a lot of what we're seeing is people starting to stratify in their addiction. You see a lot of young people, particularly vaping, has become a big issue.
Yes, it has.
As well as marijuana issues have happened younger. We're also seeing a ton of opiate usage or opioid usage. And that's been across the world, especially through Europe. We're starting to see a lot of that as well. We're seeing increases to some degree in alcohol in some populations more than others. We actually saw through COVID, there's been a spike in women with alcohol issues that has come out. So the landscape is sort of changing as well. Like you actually mentioned, it's become easier to access everything. Interestingly enough, I've actually changed the way that I talk to people about handling specifically alcoholism, because you can just order it. If you take somebody's license and keys away, you can just have it delivered to your house. And so the landscape has shifted from this old model of, well, you take them to treatment, you keep them home, you get them sober. It just isn't the case anymore.
Well, and I think every family has someone maybe under the same roof with them, certainly in their history, that is an addict. So I told you we could use my family as a real life example. My dad was an alcoholic. He also took many prescription meds for mental issues, health issues. He was hospitalized twice for mental breakdowns. My brother died in his 50s of a heroin overdose. So we have, and my dad's dad died when he was a baby, and then he made just bad choices. I mean, he, some of the problems that he had were just of his own choices. So take us, there's 5 kids in our family. Sure. How do we pay attention to and be aware of how that could be affecting us in ways we might not be able to see or feel on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. One of the things that we see a lot in family systems work is this idea of triangles, where 2 people, particularly the parents, when they can't resolve their stuff, they use something else to balance it out. My 2 favorite examples of this are travel baseball and
travel baseball.
Yeah. So here's why. Not everybody who's in travel baseball is bad, but we all know, if you've ever been to one of those games, there are the parents who lose their religion.
Yeah. I've never been that parent.
Oh, that's no.
Just kidding. I have been. What's wrong with you, Blue? I've been that person that I'm like, I'll never be that.
but we do know these people that it's like, okay, you've invested too heavily in your child and your whole happiness is based on that. That's an example of this triangulation where we use things to balance out our relationship to help make sense of things. When we see family dynamics such as what you've described, first off, it's a miracle that you've made it out of that alive.
It is a miracle. It's a bona fide miracle. It is.
I would say so, especially working through type of clients and stuff that I've been through, it is a miracle. One of the things that we've seen is that those triangles are incredibly intense in terms of addiction. Mm-hmm. My goodness, in that triangle is children, but it's also the substance, right? Like mom and dad have issues, and let's say for this instance, dad goes and drinks about it, right? But for some reason they stay together. It's that triangulation, it's that thing that keeps the relationship stable. And it gets passed down through families, through like your brother, even on the way up. It's not just, I saw my dad drink. It is, this is how I make sense of the world. This is what balances my interactions with my loved ones. Mm-hmm. And also there at the house. So that makes it a little easier too. But that's how we, a very 30,000 foot view, see how that runs.
It's so true. And it's so prevalent in today's world, because there's no family that doesn't have this reeking through it. So, sure. So I chose to get counseling when I got married and had kids. My dad was married 9 times. So, it was just a big old mess. So I thought, oh my gosh, I know I need counseling. I don't even know. I'm just going to go in and tell them, some stuff. And, I think people don't understand how to cope with things because people don't know the way to cope with things. We just pretend they don't exist and we sweep them under the rug. But what's wrong with that? Because it always comes back around to having to acknowledge what you've walked through, right?
Sure. We see issues with intimacy in what we call in the psychology realm dyadic relationships, where it's just the two of you. You're not using someone or something else to help mitigate the relationship. So when you go to counseling, part of the thing that is super common is people talk about boundaries and what those mean. And in reality, it is protecting intimate and vulnerable relationships with people who can give back to you and care, right? This isn't just, how do I lower my anxiety? Maybe anxiety is a good thing. Maybe that's telling you that that's something wrong. And for your case, I mean, your dad loved getting married so much, he did it 9 times. Like, that's going to bring a lot of stress. That's going to bring these things for you that, you have to sort out. And for therapy, it can be a wonderful tool to help you understand how you've interacted with relationships and what's been taught to you as well.
So with the elevated depression, anxiety, we see it on the news all the time that, oh my gosh, the world is, facing a crisis. I believe that goes back to a crisis of identity.
Sure.
Like, who am I? Like, I'm married. I've been married 30 years. I have 2 kids. I have 2 grandkids. I'm all those people, but I'm still Beth. And sure. I think people lose sense of who they are. So how is it that we get people back to a sense of identity so that God created you and he gave you everything you need to live the life he assigned for us? How do we get back to not being all the roles and doing all the things and really loving and investing in who we are wholly before God?
Sure. One thing, if anybody talks with me at length about anything, I love to qualify what we're talking about. One of the expansions that we've seen in anxiety and depression is because we've expanded the definition. Okay. So part of it is, yes, there's increased problems of that lack of identity, that isolation. Absolutely. We've also expanded what counts, right? So technically speaking, if you're grieving and you're feeling really lost, we could categorize that as depression. I wouldn't personally, because I call that a healthy thing. If you lose a spouse, you should grieve. So part of the issue with that specifically is we've expanded what those things mean, and so it catches more people. To the identity part of it, it would be very easy to say, well, go pray about it. Okay, but we're healed through relationship, right? And so one of the big things that I talk about, particularly with my Christian clients, is the difference between a legalistic base with God and one that's relationally based. Because legalism is God and myself and these rules. And those rules mitigate relationship, much like triangles do in alcoholism, addiction, and things like that. When we talk about having that identity, it's that dyadic interaction, that vulnerable and intimate connection with God where he speaks to us, not necessarily audibly, but it's that interaction where we find our identity in that continual connection. It's not just I sit down in a pew and then I say, my prayers, I move on, and I wonder why I don't have $20,000 in my bank account and I don't feel happy all the time. It's that continual relationship, much like we see in earthly relationships with a spouse, right? We get healing from that. So when you talk about identity, people are looking for a checkbox, and that's simply not biblical, and we don't see it happen in research either.
That's very well. I mean, I understand that, and especially the part where we've expanded what the definition is, because we have other emotions other than happiness, and I think that's where we trip up ourselves. And I still remember a counselor when I went in and I was crying and I couldn't stop crying. I said, "I've lost all control of my emotions," and her response was, "Good." I'm like, "What do you mean good? That's terrible." But yeah. I had to learn how to be sad.
Sure.
I had to learn how to be mad. I had to learn what to do with anxiety and things like that. So some of that is just normal, right? Don't we have to learn how to deal with our emotions from a healthy perspective and know they're going to happen?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I talk about in the book is sorting out what makes sense. I call it boxing our mental health issues, where there are some things that we feel that would make sense to anyone, right? That if you get in a car accident, it's going to stress anybody out, right? That's not unique. That's life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there are the things that happen to us because life has happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, if I've experienced, parental absence when my partner takes off, right? And they don't answer their phone for a while, that's going to affect me, but it's not going to affect everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also the things that are specifically mental health issues, right? If you have something like, let's say, schizophrenia, that doesn't affect everybody, and it's not because of a personal issue, it's a brain issue, right? And so when we talk about, I just have anxiety, what does that mean? Is that a normal thing? Then good, you should feel it. Is it because of something that's happened to you? Let's process through it, right? If it's individual, that's where the work is in therapy, right? All of that other stuff we recognize, mitigate, and honor, that stuff where it's individual to you, that's where the goal is in therapy.
So let's take that into a situation where you've got a family and there's an elephant in the room. It's someone who's got an addiction. It hasn't been named or admitted or anything like that, but someone has a problem and no one knows what to do about it. What's the next best step?
So typically in family systems, there's someone who tends to be the truth teller. And if you wait around long enough, that truth teller will come out. And a lot of times it could be kids, because kids love to tell all the secrets.
Yeah.
But if in a family therapy session, you're there for a reason, right? We're not there because everything's fantastic. But if everybody knows there's an issue and nobody's saying anything, we're protecting either someone or ourselves or whatever it is. You have to provide the hope for the future that these people really need, right? You're not going to tell me about your issues if you think I'm incompetent as a therapist. You're not going to go to someone who's supportive if you think they're going to shut you down. So for those elephants in the rooms, and particularly when it comes to Christianity and faith, it's hope. It's maybe you can do something because I feel lost. So that's always what I start with client situation is, you feel lost, there is hope.
Yeah. So that leads me to a question of, you're a therapist, you're very qualified to help with someone. How important is it when you're facing a problem to talk to a right person? Because some people can give really bad advice and they're not in a circle of wisdom. And I think this is a critical point, because we can get led in the right direction and the wrong direction in a very quick minute. So what's your thought on that?
So there are a ton of people who have wonderful intentions. And there are a ton of people who have personal experience in dealing with some of this. Neither of those people is good for everyone. And so there are people who have personal experience, and maybe there's a subset of people that can be super helpful. right? They can say, you know what, this is great. You're saying exactly my story. Chances are, though, they can't help a ton of people if all they rely on is just their personal experience, right? It is so important, and I think particularly in terms of faith, to have somebody who walks both worlds, who knows the psychological aspects and how to process and work through coping skills and find resources, but also get to a point where you realize that you have what we call that God-shaped hole in your heart, right? Mm-hmm. That has somewhere to put that faith, because an addict needs hope. And if you simply tell them that their hope is, well, you could get better. For what? Why would I get better? My family hates me. Why would I do it? Right? And so you need someone who can do all those practical things, that can sit with the family and say, hey, this is the cycle you're experiencing. Because I talk about that, like, hey, there's a cycle of addiction. There's a cycle of stuff with family too, right? Mm-hmm. So somebody who can explain it all, but can also sit there at the end of the day, go through all of the weeds, break down all that psychological stuff, and then meet with Jesus, right? Yeah. To break all of that down. And that's where I think that you find the good ones that walk both of those.
And coming out, they say you're only as sick as your secrets. Those things that you hold in, and those things, that's typically what people do. That's why addiction, I believe, is so high, is because people are hiding. Mm-hmm. So what's that first step in maybe coming forward to a trusted soul and saying, hey, I have a problem. We have a problem. I need help. How does that look on a regular basis with just someone who doesn't know what to do next?
So for me specifically, one of the things that I do is I throw out all of the feelers and I let people come to me, because if they're looking for hope, Jesus says, if you look for me, you'll find me, right? And so you want to honestly search yourself and find good wisdom on who to look for and who to reach out for, because it's not just in addiction that your secrets will keep you sick. It's your secrets will kill you. And your secrets will absolutely destroy your family, right? Yes. God can heal all things, but there's no reason to have to go through all of that and continually. So if you are the loved one of an addict and you're saying this secret is taking us out, you can seek help on your own. I have plenty of clients where the spouse has reached out and said, hey, we need help. And I've met with them for a couple sessions, and then the other person has joined. You can seek help on your own. Chances are that's like one of the best things you can do is seeking for yourself. So just because someone else is keeping a secret doesn't mean you have to.
And it doesn't mean they have to go to therapy ever. It means even if they don't, I like to say, better me, better we. The better I am, the better my marriage is. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's very important. Well, so you have created content as someone with experience in the addiction, therapy, families, crisis, all the things. You've developed content that is outside of what most people know. And we talked a little bit about this before we went on air. And one of the things that you changed that you think has been more productive is your perception to the word disease. Can you explain that?
Sure. When we think of disease, we talk about predictability and understanding diagnosis and, how we treat it. We see disease in mental health. My favorite example of this is schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is around 1% of the population, no matter where you go in the world. Now, it manifests a little bit differently. Sometimes the voices are a little more positive, depending on what country you're in. But it's a disease we see consistently, right? That you can't talk your way out of schizophrenia. It just doesn't happen. For me, that's a brain disease. I have no question about that, right? I haven't heard of any disease that you can talk and emotionally work your way out of. That just doesn't fit for me, right? We talk about relational hurts. We don't talk about those as diseases. I think one of the reasons that we've called it a disease for so long is because we don't know what to do with it. And it's so severe that that's the best way we can describe it. As well as, quite frankly, there's a ton of money to be made in calling it a disease, which is just infinite medication and care for the rest of your life. And so we get locked in this cycle of this is scary, so it must be a disease. And also all of these people are telling us that we have to do this thing for the rest of our lives instead of finding alternate healing. And that's what it is for me. This isn't a, I've pulled something out of left field. This is a lot of stuff we've already known. We just don't apply. And we haven't really called out the problems before. And so I tell people all the time, and I told you this earlier, I'm so sick and tired of calling it a disease. I just don't do it anymore, and I don't entertain it anymore. I'll fight back tooth and nail. It just doesn't fit as a disease.
So if it's not a disease, it is a what?
So I consider it a systemic problem in a lack of silence. So we see how family systems develop addiction. And it doesn't
wait. Lack of silence. I'm processing that. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
You're good. So for the systems part, we see that family systems will inhabit these issues. We don't always create them on purpose, but every single time I've had an addict come in, you see how the family has developed this, whether intentionally or unintentionally, whether it's avoiding our own issues or pushing things down. It's every single time. I've never met a client whose family wasn't also sick, period, bar none. Okay. So we see that. For the lack of silence part, the thing that I see in every single person with addiction is they struggle with, you take away distraction, you take away family, and especially you take away that drug of choice, and they panic. Because that silence for them is absolutely deafening, because it brings all of the shame, it brings all of the memories, whether that's just trauma or the things that we've done or the things that we've sold or the things that we've lost. So it is that systemic part. It is how all of this has manifested and kept up over time. But it's also this deep pit of despair that we have to avoid in addiction, because if we were to sit in silence, all of that would be completely overwhelming.
So basically, if you keep the noise loud enough, you don't have to deal with yourself.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, it's pretty time consuming to go find drugs and find the money to do so. You don't ever have to sit still because you're either panicking looking for a drug or feeling intoxicated and not really thinking about much of anything anyway.
Well, so your book is called To Those Left Behind, and that just came out, and I know you have a copy of it with you. We'll also put it in the links. But so To Those Left Behind, let's talk about what are the encouraging things that people need to hang on to that are caught up in the news cycle, the bad news all the time, and things like that. I mean, we are Christians, we're believers, we believe God heals, he restores, he reconciles. So what are the things people can hang on to that's worth going through the work of recovery and digging deep to getting to know who you really, really are, and that you're happy with who you really, really are?
First thing, get off the news.
Yes, amen. It is bad.
It is monetized fear. So
yeah, monetized fear. That is so well said. It is so true.
So the first thing is get off the news. The second thing, one of the biggest reasons I wrote this book is I wanted to give somebody a practical object that if they sit through, they can talk any psychologist under the table about addiction.
Wow.
Works. Okay. I truly believe this, that if you were to sit and read and look through it, when you get presented all of these, well, it's a disease, and no, because of this, and this, right? You'll be able to outmaneuver all of these people. Practically speaking, there are ways that build boundaries in here, ways that you can make sense of yourself and in the world. This book specifically has no mention of the Bible or faith. If you pay attention, it's in there. I have an object lesson about a mustard seed. It's not that far of a stretch, right? And so there are these practical things like understanding our roles in codependency and unhealthy relationships. What we're looking for, what we're avoiding is in there, right? The biggest thing, so people will ask, so how do I find hope? And I use this information to say, read it. It's there. You don't have to be lost. And specifically, you don't have to be left behind like so many people are when their loved ones go to treatment. You send them off somewhere and they tell you to, well, go figure it out for yourself. No, you need help too. You need love and support just as much as they do. And so finding practical resources like this that get into the philosophical, but also what you can do can make all the difference for you, and is probably, or not probably, aside from what the addict wants to do, that is the most effective thing for their recovery, is you getting healthy.
So well said. So I think it's worth saying that, people that have been in cycles of addiction, they've read a lot of books, they've heard a lot of tapes, they've been to a lot of meetings, they've been, in the circles that are so different. But what you're offering is different, right? It's different. And I think that's to be said, because a different approach sometimes can be the one that works for someone who hasn't found something that worked for them yet, right?
I'm fully ready for, at some point, to get some angry emails from higher institutions and people that want to be upset with me because I'm so sick and tired of some of this. And so, yes, it is completely different. There's completely unique things you have never heard before in here.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing is, once you read it, it makes sense and you see it everywhere. This isn't like you're learning some brand new idea or some brand new language. I simply just show the patterns, and then it makes sense to you immediately. You start seeing it in your own life and other people's lives. So this isn't a brand new program. This is just, hey, this is what's happening. You get to decide what you do with it.
Yeah. And so the emphasis is back on choices, which life is about choices. And, we all, the Christian walk for no one, or the healthy walk, or the walk past addiction, none of these patterns are easy for anyone. You have to be willing to do the work and commit to your commitments. And that's a big part of it, right?
For sure. I have a whole section at the end of one of the chapters talking about, making boundaries and establishing them and following through if need be. But one of the big things is having that community of support. I mean, God's a triune God. He's got community. I don't know why we think we're different.
Yeah. Amen to that. So your book is a resource. It's available on Amazon and anywhere else. I'm sure it's where most books are sold, but if you Google Travis Thompson, your book will come up and people can get it and order it.
Yes, ma'am. If you, actually, I have it on my website as well, TravisThompsonCounseling.com. I've got links to all of my socials and everything, but yes, you find it on Amazon. It's there, get you quickly as well.
Well, I am so thankful to get to talk to you today. I'm always, I love counseling and listening to counselors, because I'm just always looking for something that helps not only me, but other people. And this is a big, big topic. And I'm thankful that you're not only out there for people, you're providing resources that people can tap into fairly easily.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, good luck with the book. I'm sure it's going to do really, really well. And we'll come back and talk to you again one day. And we're so glad that you've been with us. And thank you for all the work you've done and for sharing your story today.
Thank you so much for having me. You have a good day.
Okay, you too.